everyone, today I wanted to show you what I do when it comes to working with a spooky horse. I'm going to show you what I do from the ground all the way to when I get in the saddle. And before we get started, I want to know how long y'all have been riding. So let me know in the comments below. What is this? So the first place I start when it comes to working with a spooky horse is I start on the ground doing desensitization work. So desensitization training is basically when you're introducing your horse to something that they may be afraid of. So Tucker is afraid of this bag and he's afraid of a few other objects I'll show you guys. But when you start on the ground and you are introducing the object to them on the ground and purposefully, it allows them to get used to that object and it allows them to do it on their own time. So they're not being rushed to get over it and, you know, like get past the object as if you were on the trail. So horses' natural instinct is to flee if they see something that scares them. Since horses are prey animals, everything to them is looked at as a danger until they know that they can trust that object and not be afraid of it. So when we do desensitization training, we're teaching the horse that they can trust that that object isn't going to hurt them or attack them. So I thought I would show you guys some desensitization with Tucker. He is particularly afraid of new noises, so we've made this contraption where we put some peanuts in a water bottle and we're gonna shake it and desensitize him that way. And I'm just gonna show you the process of what I would do to work him through being afraid of this noise. Okay. You wanna see him? He's doing pretty good. Not even scared of it. So I was expecting Tucker to really freak out with our makeshift bottle noise thing, but that did not go as planned. He was really good. So I'm gonna just show you guys what you can do. I'll use my bag crop. He's really good with this too. I guess he's just not as spooky today as he usually is. But I'll show you how you can use pressure and release when it comes to desensitization training. So all this is it's a crop with a plastic bag attached to it. It's great for desensitizing your horse to noise and also things flapping in the wind. So I'm gonna use this. He's pretty good with this. We've worked with it before, but I just wanna demonstrate to you guys how you would desensitize a horse. So the first thing I like to do is just to introduce them to the object first and let them smell it. And that way, you know, they get to see what it is, they get to sniff it out, rather than introduce it to them by like, I have it and suddenly I bring it here. That could really freak a horse out. So I let him smell it, I let him kind of rub it on his face. Once he's comfortable with the bag and the crop from right here, then I can move on to his neck and his shoulder. And I'm just gonna rub it all over him. So if your horse is really freaked out about this, what I recommend doing is starting by just holding the bag to the stick, and that way it's not flapping and it's not really as scary as if it's like waving in the wind. And I would start here, even if I have to hold it in my hand if the horse is that afraid. But I just rub it on him. You know, gradually get to where you got your bag in the wind. Oh, he was trick at that one. And I'm just gonna rub it over him. Good boy. So at any point, if he starts moving away from the bag, I can just kind of bring the bag back. Because if he's moving away from the bag, it means that he is uncomfortable and he feels like he needs to flee from it. So when he does that, I can just kind of hold the bag away from him a little bit and get comfortable again, and then I'll bring it back. So even if he's freaking out to the point where I have to go back to this, then I will, because I just want him to get used to the bag and the bag touching him. So another thing you can be aware of is if there's a specific area that the horse does not like touched. So if I'm rubbing the bag all over him and I get to his legs and he starts dancing around and he does not like his legs touched, I'll just go back up to a place where he was comfortable with. So if I start down here, he starts dancing, I'll just go back up to his shoulder until he calms down, and then I'll just work my way down again. And this way is pressure and release. And you're teaching the horse that like there's nothing you have to be afraid of. You know, you can relax and do this. So once they're comfortable with the bag being rubbed all over them, I'm gonna get them used to the bag just flying around them. So all I do is I just go like this, and I'll wave it back and forth. Good boy. And so as you can see, when I kind of went in front of him, he kind of wanted to go back. So if your horse does that or they start moving around, just take the bag and put it to the other side. So if he's freaking out, I'll keep the bag over here, and then I'll just gradually move it closer to him so he can get used to it. And then I can go over him. So as you desensitize, just remember to offer the horse that release if they do start freaking out. Let's say I put the bag right here and the horse starts freaking out. Well, some people may think they need to keep the bag here and kind of like go after their horse until their horse calms down. Well, think about the situation. If the bag is here and they're freaking out and you just leave it here, the horse thinks that something's attacking it, right? And so if you do get that moment where the horse wants to move away or freak out, it's important to release the pressure and bring the bag back to an area where the horse is comfortable with. And that way they're learning that they're safe. You know, if they feel uncomfortable, then you're gonna give them that safety that they want. So now I'm gonna get in the saddle and show you guys some things you can do when your horse is spooking and you're on them. But before we do that, if you get any value out of our videos, please like them and also subscribe to our channel. Alright, so I'm going to share with you guys some helpful tips you can use when you're on your horse to help control them in a situation where they're freaking out and spooking. We're also going to set up an object to see if we can get Tucker to freak out so we can demonstrate what you're supposed to do. But we'll see how that goes. He seems like he's in a pretty chill mood today. So one point I quickly want to cover when it comes to correcting your horse in a situation where they're spooking is you have to remember not to discipline or punish your horse for that behavior. So, you know, if a horse spooks, it can surprise us and startle us, and we just react because it happens so randomly. And sometimes our reaction is getting mad at the horse. But in reality, when you get mad at your horse, you're kind of reaffirming their belief that that object is bad. Because if they spook at the object and then I smack them and I'm like, hey, don't do that, you know, they're gonna think, oh my gosh, every time I go near this object I get smacked and it really terrifies me. So it's not a good combination. So we want to remember to stay calm and be patient with our horses so that they learn that they can trust us to get them through this situation. So the first thing I teach any new rider is how to do a one rein stop. So the one rein stop is the emergency brake for your horse. So if your horse is spooking and they bolt, or if they're rearing and bucking, or if they're just freaking out about something, you can do the one rein stop. And basically what that's going to do is it's going to control your horse, so the only thing they can do is go in a tight circle. They can't buck, they can't rear, they can't bolt. The only thing they're going to be able to do is go around and around and around. So this is one thing you can try if your horse is really freaking out and you just need to get them under control so you can, you know, go back to where you need to be or to maybe get off. So I'm going to show you guys how to do this. It's super simple and easy. So let's say you're riding along and then suddenly your horse spooks and they bolt. So what you're going to do with the one rein stop is I'm going to take my hands and I'm going to run one hand down my rein and then bring this rein back to my hip. And so this is going to turn the horse's head to the side. So if my horse is moving, this is immediately going to make them go in this circle where the only thing they can really do is move their hind end around. And so then the horse is just going to be like this. And so this way, you know, you have control in terms of like you're controlling where your horse is going. They're just going in this small circle around them. And since what you're asking your horse is basically to disengage their hind end from you sitting up here. So when you disengage the hind end, if you've watched any of our previous videos, that takes the power away from the horse. All their power comes from back here. So when they're just disengaging and crossing one hind leg in front of the other, they're not able to push themselves forward as to bolt or to buck or to rear. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to canter around and then I'm going to do a one rein stop so you guys can see just how effective it is. So what you're seeing is basically Tucker cantering around, so we can say this is like him bolting. And what I do is I just reach down, I reach my hand down the rein, I bring it back to my hip, and you can see he immediately stops. That's because he's done this 1,000 times and he knows when I do the one rein stop he needs to stop. But if you do this and your horse is spooking, you may just get them to where they're gonna stay in that circle until they start to calm down and then they'll stop. So one time I was out on the trail and we were by a river and there was someone across the river who was doing something, and that freaked Tucker out. I've never seen him freak out that bad. So he was trying to bolt and take off back to the barn. So luckily, you know, I knew my one rein stop. I was just doing my one rein stop. He was spinning in circles like crazy, but I was like, man, it's a good thing I know this, because I had control of him, you know? He could not take off. So it's very helpful to know, and I recommend practicing in the arena just so you get comfortable with the movement, and that way you can feel really confident when you go out on trails or you face an object where your horse is spooky. So our next point will cover what your first response should be once you gain control of your horse and you can help them get over their fear of whatever it is they're spooking at. So the first thing I would do is retreat to a spot where the horse is comfortable with. So let's say you're out in the pasture on a trail ride and you suddenly come across a herd of cows and your horse is freaking out about the cows. So take your horse back to an area that they're comfortable with before you start trying to work through the problem. So that way you're retreating, showing them like, look, you're safe, it's okay, and then we're gonna go from there. So once you're back to an area where your horse is comfortable with, then you can start working them and engaging their mind with certain exercises. The point is you want to get your horse's feet moving, because when a horse's feet is moving, that means they're going to be focused on what they're doing rather than focused on what's out in the distance or whatever is freaking them out. So real quick, I'm going to show you guys some really simple exercises you can do to get your horse focused and back on you. But the biggest thing is once you get back to an area where your horse is comfortable, is just to get them working and engaged rather than have them focused on what is terrifying them. So one of the best exercises you can do is just get your horse trotting and doing a bunch of circles and serpentines and change of direction. The trot is the hardest gait for the horse, believe it or not. And so that's really going to get them focused. And by doing circles and transitions and changing direction, that's going to keep things changing up for them so that their mind has to be engaged and they're not going to be focused on what's in the distance. Another great thing to get your horse's mind focused on what you're asking them to do is to get your horse to change their bend. So I can have my horse bend this way, so where their neck is like this and their body's kind of bending around my leg, and then I can shift the bend so that they're like this. And by doing this, you know, I'm getting them focused, and then I can add some gaits in there where I may do it at a walk, then a trot and a canter, just to help them focus and stay connected. Alright, so I'm bending to the left. And then I can bend to the right. Come on. There you go. Good boy. And I'll change my bend to the left. Good boy. Another great exercise you can do is just make your horse zig and zag back and forth on the trail. And this will help them focus, because it's like they're constantly turning and bending and going like this. So this will help them focus, and it also kind of gives you a control of their speed. They can't get too quick doing this. And you can do this at a walking trot, and that usually seems to get their mind focused enough to where I can do my next step. So our next point is, once you feel like you have good control and a handle on your horse, then you can start to gradually move towards the object that they're freaking out on. The thing is, you want to make sure you're continuing to do the exercises to have your horse's mind focused. So the overall goal is to have your horse's mind focused so that it's easier to then approach this item. And so they're not looking at that item and being like, what the heck is that? Rather, they're focused on what you're asking them to do, and so it's going to be much easier for them to approach that object and not freak out about it. So as you're approaching the spooky object, if it ever gets to a point where the horse stops focusing on you again and they're focused on being afraid of that object, once again, you're just going to retreat to a place where you can get them focused again and then go back at it. So it's just basically like what we did on the ground with the bag. So we would first bring the bag towards the horse, and if the horse was apprehensive and started to move away, we would release the pressure, because we want to teach the horse that they don't have to be afraid. They're not going to be pushed into the situation. Rather, they're going to get there and they're going to feel confident and comfortable. Our next point we're going to cover before we get into what not to do when your horse spooks is never be afraid to just get off your horse and do groundwork. If you're in a situation where you don't feel safe on your horse, or maybe it's just too much for you to handle, you can jump off your horse and start doing groundwork and getting them used to the object while you're on the ground before you get back in the saddle. So this is actually really effective, and it may help your horse accept the object more. But this is always something you can do. If you do want a lead rope to take with you as you go on a trail ride, or if you may come across a scary object, you can always put a halter over your bridle, and then you can tie your lead rope off to your horn if you're in a western saddle, or you can just tie it around your horse's neck in case you need it. But that's just something to remember. You don't have to feel ashamed if you have to get off your horse. This is a way you can stay safe and stay comfortable, and also make sure you're communicating with your horse effectively. So real quick, let's cover what not to do when it comes to your horse spooking. So our first point for what not to do when your horse is spooking is try not to tense up. So when you tense up, you're subconsciously telling your horse, this is a situation where you need to freak out. So have you ever seen those safari videos where the lion jumps on the zebra's back and it's like, you know? So when you tense up and your legs squeeze them and you're like this, to the horse that automatically feels like, oh my gosh, there's a crazy lion on my back that's jumping on me and it's going to get me. So that's what your body mimics to them if that happens. Another thing to know is that if a horse can feel a little fly landing on it, then the horse can probably feel your heart rate and the way you're breathing as you sit on your horse. So if they feel that your breath is getting quicker and your heart rate is going up, that signals to them that, oh, it's time to start getting worked up. So to keep yourself from getting tense, one thing to focus on is number one, breathing deeply. When you control your breathing, you're able to control your heart rate and what you're communicating to your horse, and it also helps you relax and sit back. And the other thing to remember when it comes to tensing up is your reins. So when people notice their horse is starting to get nervous, they'll keep shortening the reins until they're suddenly like this. And you're not going to effectively communicate with your horse like that. So it's important to sit back, don't be in your horse's mouth, but you can, still control them. You have your one rein stop, you can control your bend, you can use your leg and your seat, and it's all about being relaxed. If you stay relaxed, your horse will be more likely to figure out pretty quickly that they can stay relaxed too. Another point to know for what not to do when your horse is afraid of something is don't let them just stand and stare at it. So this gives them the opportunity to freak out at it. When your horse is sitting there staring at whatever they're afraid of, you know that their focus is on that object rather than on you. So it's important that you get their focus back on you so that they can quickly get over the object. Another point for what not to do if your horse is spooking is don't just walk away and not confront the problem. When you do this, you're affirming to your horse that they have a right to be scared of that object and that they should be afraid of it. You're also teaching them that they can use their spookiness to get out of situations. So I've actually worked with horses that would simply spook at things just because they didn't want to do something. Tucker here happens to be one of those guys. So that's an important thing to remember. Horses are smart and they learn how to get out of things when they don't want to do work. So that's a wrap on our video about how to handle a spooky horse. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up if you thought it helpful, and also subscribe to our channel. Now I'm going to give Tucker an apple because he was a very good boy today, weren't you?